In this lesson, we're going to consider the long-term causes of World War I. This terrible conflict raged from 1914 to November of 1918 and pulled all the mighty old empires of Europe into it. It was a terrible war, a horrifying war. Up to 20 million people were killed. There were desperately lethal new weapons such as poison gas and the machine gun, the fearsome tank. Well, after 4 years of fighting and all of these deaths and destruction, the victors met at Versailles. They had no doubt who was to blame for starting the war. They blamed Germany. But was Germany to blame? Let's consider 4 long-term factors leading up to the war, and you can decide how much the German government is to blame in each case. So here we are with factor number 1, the rise of Germany. Well, in the 1860s, there was no Germany. There was no nation called Germany. What there were a collection of small, independent states. Have a look at the map. Here's one for you, the Kingdom of Saxony. Next to it, the Kingdom of Bavaria. Well, the largest of these German states, underlined here you can see, was the Kingdom of Prussia. Prussia, and some of these states, they were talking about unifying, combining all of these smaller German states into one larger German empire, and Prussia was loudest in the calls for this. The neighbour, however, of Germany to the west, France, was worried by this expanding power, this new neighbour to its east, and France declared war on Prussia in 1870. So France declared war in 1870. However, Prussia, the Prussian military, was very well organised, very well disciplined. They had an aggressive plan, and they were backed up by some very impressive modern artillery. And France actually ended up losing the war. So France lost the war, Prussia won, and France additionally lost part of its territory, outlined here with the blue circle, the territory of Alsace-Lorraine. France, obviously, the French government, the French people, were not happy about losing the war and bitterly resented the loss of Alsace-Lorraine. Well, after the war, the ideal of the German unification was realised. So Germany united into a German empire in 1871. All of those smaller states, including the largest of them, Prussia, become a new German empire. The old king of Prussia, Wilhelm I, he became the emperor or Kaiser in German of this new larger German state. The head of his government, a gentleman named Bismarck, you can see they were fond of very impressive moustaches at this time, Bismarck had a new powerful position as the Chancellor or leader of the German government. So 1871, the new state of Germany is born, a powerful new state in the middle of Europe. Throughout the 1870s and into the 1880s, the economy of this new German state goes from strength to strength. Here you can see the very famous Krupp steelworks. In fact, the German steel industry actually exceeded, it overtook that of Great Britain, which was the nation where the Industrial Revolution had first begun. So the economy, the industry of this new German state was getting stronger and stronger all of the time. Bismarck, however, despite his nickname of the Iron Chancellor, he was very diplomatic in his approach to his European neighbours. He was anxious to avoid a war. The old enemy, France, he made sure that she couldn't gather enough alliances or friends to pose a threat to Germany. And the massive neighbour to the east, the Russian Empire, Bismarck made a lot of diplomatic efforts there. He tried to get friendly relations with the large neighbour to the east, the Russian Empire. Okay, so what happens next? In 1888, Kaiser Wilhelm I died and was replaced by Kaiser Wilhelm II. Now, I don't know if it was his upturned moustache or what, but Kaiser Wilhelm II was much more ambitious than Kaiser Wilhelm I on the world stage. He saw that the British had a vast global empire the French did too, and he felt that Germany, this new state in Europe, they were entitled to a new empire too. Why shouldn't they have one? Bismarck, the old diplomatic chancellor, was sacked in 1890. A common saying now moving towards the end of the 19th century in Germany, one saying that was said in Britain, our empire, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, the Germans felt that they should have their place in the sun, they should have their own empire. This is going to cause problems. It leads into the arms race, because if Germany is going to create and maintain a large overseas empire, they're going to need a navy. So the German government declare in 1900 the construction of a large new German fleet, 41 battleships and 60 cruisers. Now this really worries Great Britain, which has this large overseas empire and depends on its navy, depends on the Royal Navy to defend and protect this empire. So it seems like Germany is entering into a rivalry with Britain. In response to this new German fleet, the British commission a fleet of very large and powerful new battleships known as dreadnoughts. In response, the Germans then build newer, bigger and more powerful battleships of their own. The British then build super dreadnoughts. It would be almost comical if it were not for the fact that a lot of money was being spent on this, and this rivalry, building these new battleships, increased tension between Great Britain and Germany. It wasn't just these two nations. France, and there's a picture of a dreadnought, by the way. France, the neighbour of Germany to the west, well, they'd been beaten by Germany in 1871. The German army, as well as its navy, was increasing. The French also increased the size of their army to a massive army of 4 million troops by 1914. Also, kind of worrying for Germany, the Russian Empire to the east, it's also increasing the size of its army. It's a little bit more backward. It's less industrialised, less technologically developed than the Central European and Western European countries, but they're starting to build railways, military railways, and these are a great concern to Germany because these railways could potentially take the vast Russian army and deliver it into the heart of Russia and its ally Austria-Hungary to the south. Let's now look at factor number 4. Before we do so, in fact, let's consider the Schlieffen Plan. The Germans were worried. They have potentially a hostile neighbour to the east, the Russian Empire, and to the west, France, the old enemy. So they start to consider military plans, and the plan that they come up with was the Schlieffen Plan. Here's von Schlieffen here. Again, you can see the famous moustache of the time, very prominent there. The Schlieffen Plan was this. They felt, in order to avoid a war on two fronts, if it looked like war was likely, before the Russians could mobilise. Mobilise means to assemble, to gather together their large army and get it ready to fight. They felt before the Russians were able to mobilise their vast army, what Germany ought to do is attack France in a lightning strike as quick as possible, knock France out of the war, and therefore avoid a disastrous war on two fronts, then bring their army back across on the German rail system, and then take out Russia to the east. So, the thing about the Schlieffen Plan, in some ways it's a defensive plan. They're worried about fighting a war on two fronts. It's also a very aggressive plan, because it involves invading France first. And therefore, it looks like potentially Germany there is the aggressor. Let's move on now to factor number 4, the two hostile alliances. So, in Central Europe, we can see here the German Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. These form an alliance in 1879. Now, the Russian Empire to the east, again, they're worried about Germany, they're worried about the large German army that's being developed, so they create an alliance with France in 1892. Here we have this situation that Germany was worried about. It now has a hostile alliance both to its east and to its west. Great Britain now starts to look at Europe, and it needs allies too. It considers an alliance with Germany. After all, France in the past had been Britain's traditional enemy. However, the policies of Kaiser Wilhelm and the aggressive naval expansion, which seemed to threaten the Royal Navy, which Britain needed to defend its empire, causes Britain to seek alliances elsewhere. They don't enter, actually, into a formal alliance, a legal treaty which would force them to help. It's a bit strange, this, and it comes in to be a bit important later on. What Britain does instead, it creates an entente, which is kind of like a friendly understanding or agreement. It creates this with France in 1904 and with Russia in 1907. See, I've done these lines as dotted lines rather than this line here indicating the formal treaty between France and Russia. So there you have it. You have two hostile alliances in Europe. You have the creation of a powerful new Central European state, the German Empire. How does it relate to its neighbours? You have the somewhat aggressive policies of Kaiser Wilhelm, building his naval fleet, helping to spur on the other factor, factor number 3, the arms race, which increases tension also. And the final factor, number 4, the alliances. So you be the judge. To what extent was Germany responsible for these 4 long-term causes?